Welcome once again to At the Table with CAHSAH and our special series on California's hospice emergency regulations. My name is Mark Wilson. Throughout this series, we've been taking these new requirements and asking, I think, a very few practical questions. And this is designed to sort of get you informed as to what the webinar is going to be like next Wednesday. And on the webinar, you can actually ask questions because it's live, and you get those questions answered by the very same experts that are with us today. Today, we're going to talk about what does hospice leadership actually need to know and do differently when it comes to, what are we talking about today? Oh, changes the state requires you to report. And with us on this podcast, once again, is Cindy Hatton of Hatton Consulting, Annette Lee of Provider Insights, and Sharon Fredericks of SNS Home Care Consulting. All three nationally recognized hospice experts. Welcome to you three again.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mark.
Good to see you.
So where do we start with this? Can we do a big picture on this one? I mean, we usually start with sort of a broad stroke on the subject. And again, it's changes the state requires you to report. I can't imagine there wouldn't be much of anything that the state wouldn't want to know as far as reporting goes. What would you like to start with, and who would like to start? Sharon?
Maybe when they did the state audit, plus surveyors are seeing that agencies are not notifying CDPH when they move, when they add a location, when they change administrators or director of patient care services or one of those positions. Other things, those are the things that, people forget, that you have to be submitting your information to them. And they found that there were people who had moved years before, weren't in that location, and the state did not know that. And so it's important for you to do those notifications.
A quick question, follow up on that. Is there usually one particular person inside the organization that owns this responsibility of reporting all these changes, and who is that?
Well, it probably differs from each organization. In our organization, we had the administrative assistant to the CEO is the one who kept the official files, and they worked with our quality department as well.
I can imagine if everybody assumes somebody else is handling it, if they're not absolutely, very specific about who does it, that's usually where some problems will begin. I wonder, and there's so many things that we could talk about today, I know. Maybe we could start with one of the biggest events an organization can experience, and that's the change of ownership.
I think any of these are so important because, again, Cindy hit the why. CDPH felt like they don't have a handle on what's going on, right? And they found that there are bad players that infiltrated our passion and our love and our business. And they're saying we need to know these things, and not only know them, but many of them we need to know far in advance. And that's some of this change as far as the emergency regs, is not just saying we need notification, but things that perhaps in the past you felt like, oh, I have 30 days and I can let them know. Now they're saying, no, we need to know in advance about this. We need to know 120 days in advance if you're doing a change of ownership. And so this webinar is going to be full of lots of dates and numbers and tools and checklists, be able to ensure that you know exactly when you need to let people know these things. But I love your point you just made. We need to ensure a champion of these things because, as Cindy said, in every agency, this might look a little bit different because some agencies are quite large and you have layers, right, that can handle some of these things. Others, it's always going to just float right back to maybe that same one person, but from the regulator's point of view, who's at the top of the food chain, or who's at the top of responsibility? It's always going to be administrator.
Right.
So, ensuring that they have either taken this lead or they have assigned it and they're following up, right? Trust and verify that this is getting done.
Is it always just the existing owner, or does the new owner have to play in this too?
Oh, good point. There are some things that we would need to ensure that there was collaboration and feedback to the powers that be as well. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't want to depend that the existing was going to do it, right? You would want to make sure as the new folks coming in, this was done correctly.
Yeah, and I know you all work with so many different agencies, around the country and whatnot. What's the biggest chow mistake you've seen providers make, or something that's typical?
Well, sometimes I think it goes back to what Annette was saying, that there's usually in a child 2 people that are in the lead, the old and the new coming in, and then somebody switches in the middle of all that, or somebody's on vacation and it doesn't get down to the next person to at least call the state and say, hey, they're going to be back in the country Monday morning. We'll call you right away. And that's what I've seen, is that type of communication. It's just lost in the shuffle of everything. Somebody leaves, your administrative assistant doesn't quite catch it. She misses it by a week for some reason, things like that.
Yeah.
It has to almost be a daily check. Who checked on it today? What was done? And then we'll give some examples, I think, as we talk, that do not expect the state. They're not going to keep track of it for you.
No, I wouldn't think they would.
No.
And they're not going to remind you either.
Right.
No. And it says right in one of the AFLs, they don't need to remind you.
You mean you're not going to get a gentle call on, Friday to remind you that?
No.
Okay. Look, there's a bunch of things that I've got here on my list of things to talk to you about. And let's do this for purposes of time. And I know that there's some things you can talk about a little bit now and some things that would really take a lot longer and you want to save them for the webinar. So I'm going to list them, and if you say pass, that means you'd rather talk about it next Wednesday. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay. Let's talk unmet needs.
Well, we've discussed a bunch of that, and I think it'll continue to come up. Eric's has talked about that all the time and is considering putting geographical services areas and the unmet needs kind of all in one. You have to almost think of that as a program, not separate policies.
Okay. So let's go.
On that webinar, we did dive deep because CDPH does give a very finite way to calculate that. Mm-hmm. And they tell us exactly how to do it. So that's a big level of detail. So I think that's a pass.
Okay. Yep. Right.
Yeah,
all right,
I think they did a good job covering all those details.
Let's go to professional licenses. Hospices depend on licensed professionals, of course, throughout the organization. So what happens when there's a change in the status of one of those licenses?
That's a good one. Let's talk about how do we ensure that a change hasn't happened? What are we doing proactively, right, as an organization? Because I think, we need to do a little better due diligence as organizations, because we're finding that that's not always getting done at the normal time points. And I think it's even better to do it even more routinely, because things do happen, even with some of the best folks that you just don't even expect these things to happen. And then here you are as an organization running without the right credentialed people. Yeah. And that can be devastating. And that's true with the licensure. That's true with the OIG checks. There's a lot of things that we know now that from even a federal level goes above and beyond CDPH, but from a federal level, we see that there are agencies being shut down because there have been affiliations with other agencies that had problems, and it's the affiliation. So talk about going back to the schoolyard where, your parents said, well, you got to choose your friends carefully because you end up getting associated, right? And you get in trouble with the troublemakers. So it is, unfortunately, something that I think we will have to continue to work harder to do a better job looking at those things. Have you heard about that a lot, Cindy?
I think that there are ways of putting mechanisms in place, and there are actual companies who will run your list every month and have flags so that, you're checking all those different licensing, the OIG, the Medicare, they're not able to do Medicare, all those different ones.
Right,
So yeah,
the
there
exclusion
are
list.
ways that you can utilize the companies that are out there to do that, and it just scrubs it every month. And so then I think it also has flags, if I remember.
Well, and there have to be consequences put in your handbook. If you ask for things and people don't get stuff in, you don't get any assignments until
Right.
it's corrected.
Right.
Okay, let's move on to the organization's license itself. Is there a grace period, by the way, or should I never assume that there is one when you've got a hospice license renewal?
Well, they have been known to, in fact, this was a question in the 25 conference from someone that had sent in their renewal fee and was requesting from the state a response, and it was already 2 months overdue. And the only thing that we were told, and when I followed up with that person, was as long as you have your canceled check, which they say they can cancel right away without even opening the rest of your application, that would show that at least you were doing your best to renewal stuff. But that took that agency a couple months at least after their date because it was lost in the shuffle up there. They get thousands of pieces of paper. And so again, if it's not on your calendar and somebody's not checking, okay, this was due, who do we talk to, et cetera, that's when, if you can verify that you've been tracking it in your own audit and tracking, you'll probably be okay. But don't give up because it just takes a while for them to find everything.
And then the other thing is, do not wait till the last minute. They are not going to send you a letter that says your license is expiring. And make sure you know that you should have that date glued into your calendar and making sure that you're submitting early enough. It's like, and I will tell you, being a nurse in the state of California, as soon as you get that notice, you want to get it in there because they also are very, very slow.
Well, and I want to ask too, have the new regulations changed anything about how providers should approach the renewal at all, or is it pretty much same old, same old?
I don't think they've changed much. Maybe a little bit more specific to get it in early, but that's about it.
Yeah,
and to really let people know, we do not don't expect us to send you a letter.
Okay. Yeah. Good to know.
They specifically said that in the emergency regs. They said, you want to do this at least 30 days in advance and know that we are not going to remind you.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I have another.
Well, there is a reason that when you go into most agencies, they have their license posted right up front, because then you're looking at it every week when you go in going, oh, that's got to get done. It's got to get done. I mean, we don't forget birthdays. So,
Speak for yourself. I don't remember when my own birthday is.
Probably your driver's license. You know that has to be renewed.
No. Oh. No, I don't. Okay, let's move on. I have here one that I know nothing about. Required postings. Is that anything that we want to talk about today? Or you want to save that?
I think pass because we've talked about that.
Okay, voluntary license cancellation. Voluntarily surrendering or canceling a hospice license.
Yes,
I know it's not something you can
voluntarily.
I know you can't. You can't decide to do it Friday and have it happen Monday, right? Like most of this stuff.
No, but you could decide and you send it in, and in the Article 1 in the licensure section of the regulations, those have not changed, so you can look it up, and it does give you quite a bit of detail on what to send in. And the one client I worked with that did that actually followed up then in about 4 days to make certain. Always send your stuff up to CDPH with the receipt in the mail that you're going to get something back, and then give them a couple days after that. They do log everything in so they can find out that it came in. And then she was able to contact somebody directly, and they worked with that. It took her about a week until they paired up, but everybody knew that was happening. And you have a year then, which you can extend if you voluntarily cancel your license. You have a year. You can extend that if you have circumstances that the state approves of. So it's easier than getting closed down if you've really
Right.
got some problems. Yeah.
Much better.
Okay.
Much better.
So,
And remember, there's multiple layers because in California, we have a state license, but then we're also certified and probably accredited with a deemed status for certification. So remember, all of this communication has to go
to everybody,
CDPH
right.
and CMS and your accrediting organization who you got your certification through. So it does need to ensure that we hit all of those marks. I was just checking on that time frame, a 60-day written notice to CDPH. And they're very specific about what has to be included in that, mainly demographics, but also your closure date. The reason for that has to be a signed statement by your administrator. So yeah, there's very concrete things to follow. But again, Sharon, to your point, really great option if you're in big trouble to do this voluntarily. Don't wait for them to come and shut you down. If you know this is feeling inevitable and this is the next right step for you, then we would support that this would be done voluntarily and done right.
You know, it seems like there ought to be like some sort of regulatory trigger events that happen. And I don't know if hospices build systems like that or whether they just rely on that one person to make sure that everything gets done. I'm just curious about it.
There should be those triggering events. You're absolutely right, Mark. But I think in our world, we're so involved in the day-to-day operations, just making sure patients are getting seen and doing all the right things. We don't always in every organization have that one key person that's really keeping their eyes on these sort of regulatory requirements. And so we hope with this series and the tools that go along with this series that this is helpful to bring up all those very key factors that we have to ensure are covered and give them tools to do it. Because again, I think depending on the organization, some people have people that are just, this is their job. And others, it's the same person that's running the day-to-day operations that's trying to keep up with these reg changes. So yeah, it's very different, isn't it?
Well, it can be a compliance officer that really takes those type of risk and gets them on a calendar and follows up.
Yes.
Right.
Well, your QA, if you don't have a compliance officer, which few people really do, that's their only job. So, your QA kind of does that. I also think, Annette, like you say, all of the education that Cindy's put together for everybody to learn, the more people that learn that in leadership are going to sit in a meeting going, wait a second, did somebody think about this in the last couple of months? Are we in compliance? And I think that's where the overall education will be helpful.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's kind of leads to my next question too, is actually the final question. It just, again, it seems like there's so much in this, particular subject. What do we report? When do we report it? How do we report it? Who reports it? Next Wednesday in the webinar, what are the big takeaways that people can expect in addition to getting their questions answered?
I think an outline of those key, like you say, triggering factors along with the time frames and the expectations. So that way there's clarity because again, some of these are longstanding, some are new, some are changed. And so to give some, again, just that baseline of clarity of these are the things you have to report. This is the time frame to report them. And these are the people you have to report them to and what to include in that are going to be just nice key takeaways that not every agency needs right now at this moment, but yet then they'll have that for future use.
Our other advantage, Mark, is that CAHSAH meets with CDPH quarterly. So some of these questions do come out. And so we sometimes have trends of what they're really focusing on for a while and what they're trying to do in backlogs and get caught up in. And then, so that's very helpful being a member of CAHSAH too, that we are on top of this with them.
Of course. CAHSAH is where, you can get everything you need at CAHSAH, right? Mm-hmm. Cindy, any final thoughts?
No, I do think that, in the webinar, you're going to hear all these things and these dates, and they've got tools for you to sort of keep track. And, you can incorporate that into your, if you do monthly CWAPI meetings or monthly or even quarterly, that you can go through and go, okay, did we have any of these things that happened? Right. That just is helpful. I always think of it as, when I do my taxes, I send the accountant that we work with sends us this check sheet. Did any of these things happen? And so it's sort of in my mind similar to that.
Okay. Well, I always like to give you guys a little bit of my takeaway from these sessions. And so here's, and see if this works for you. This is my takeaway for the day. Recognize it, document, and no one in the state needs to know about it. How does that feel?
And follow
Love
up
it.
with the state.
Trust and verify.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, listen, as with every episode in our California Hospice Emergency Regulations Special Series, today's conversation is only the first step. CAHSAH, as we said, will follow this podcast with a live webinar that takes a much deeper dive into these requirements, implementation and documentation, with an opportunity for you all to ask very specific questions from these wonderful experts and get the correct answer. And I said correct answer. Just go to CAHSAH.org to register. There's a series of 8 webinars. And I believe that if you miss the live version, you can actually get it recorded.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Okay, cool. But the best thing to do, just go to CAHSAH.org, get yourself registered. This is the stuff that you're going to need to know, or that you need to know right now. And again, the podcast you can get anytime. So use the podcast to whet your appetite, get a feel for what the webinars are going to be, and then get yourself to those webinars. If you can't, again, you can get it on the backside. But the webinar, I think, really helps you put the knowledge that we're talking about in these podcasts into actual practice, stuff that you can use right now. So again, thank you three so much. Cindy Hatton of Hatton Consulting, Annette Lee of Provider Insights, and Sharon Fredericks of S&S Home Care Consulting. It's always great to talk with you, and you're always very illuminating, and I always learn something after I speak with you, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Mark Wilson, and for everybody at CAHSAH, we appreciate you listening. Thanks for joining us for this special edition of At the Table with CAHSAH. We'll see you again. Thanks, everybody.